Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be going over my top 10 waiver wire ads for week number 17, the championship week of the 2023 fantasy football season. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into my top 10 waiver wire ads for week number 17 of the 2023 fantasy football season. We begin with my number one waiver wire ad of the week. Tjae Spears, running back of the Tennessee Titans, going up against the Houston Texans this week in Houston. Now, Tjae Spears is currently rostered in 41.1% of leagues on ESPN and 13.8% on NFL. So when it comes to Tjae Spears, he is not the safest bet at the running back position by a wide margin. And the reason why he isn't a safe bet from week in and week out is because the game script so heavily dictates how much usage Tjae Spears will get. If this ends up being a game, which I don't suspect it being, where the Tennessee Titans are up, then you're going to be seeing a lot of Derrick Henry. But if this is a game where CJ Stroud reappears, right? CJ Stroud is good to go, and the Tennessee Titans are getting their back blown out by the Houston Texans, then we are going to see a lot of Tjae Spears. But again, the Titans are a very hard team to read week in and week out. And while I think if CJ Stroud is under center for the Texans should beat the brakes off of the Titans, that is far from a guarantee. So if that is what happens, right? If the Titans are down bad, I know Ryan Tannehill being most likely under center isn't the most ideal for Tjae Spears. He should be able to get enough work to finish as a top 28 running back with top 12 upside. Now, last week, Tjae was the running back 28 in PPR up against the Seahawks at home in Tennessee. They lose the game 17-20. He has 9 carries for 40 yards and 5 receptions on 6 targets for 27 yards. Again, this does really feel like this is the game where the game script pushes towards Tjae Spears having a great game. But again, I'm not going to sit here and just lie blatantly to you and tell you that that is a guarantee, because nothing's a guarantee with the Titans. At number 2, we got Zamir White, running back of the Las Vegas Raiders, going up against the Indianapolis Colts in Indianapolis. 10.9% rostered on ESPN for White and 8% on NFL. So Zamir White is a guy that if Josh Jacobs does not end up playing on Sunday in this game against the Colts, then Zamir White is not a must-start running back, right? I don't think I'd have him ranked in like the top 10, the top 12, where you're basically getting on your knees and giving the gawk 9,000 special to the running back. But if Josh Jacobs does not play, then Zamir White is a start on a majority of teams. Now, I thought that Josh Jacobs was going to play against the Chiefs last week. That's what it seemed like. That's what every single report all week was kind of pushing towards. Hey, he's going to play. And then on Monday, right before the game against the Chiefs on Christmas, magically, he wasn't going to play. So he missed with a quad injury, as well as him having an illness. Maybe he was sick, and that's why they didn't let him play. But this is something that we got to monitor all week long. Now, obviously, if you are putting in your waiver claims today on Tuesday, then you won't be given as much information as you probably want. Now, if it comes out later tonight, hey, Jacobs is definitely going to play, then don't add Zamir White. But if you're looking for some running back depth, maybe your opponent has Josh Jacobs, then you definitely want to make sure you get in there and add Zamir White. Again, if Jacobs ends up playing, then Zamir White will probably be irrelevant. Now, he could still have a good game, but with Jacobs as the lead back, I wouldn't be looking to start Zamir White, thus him being somewhat irrelevant for fantasy football. And if he's available, I think based upon the performances he's put up ever since Josh Jacobs has been out, he's worthy of that ad, right? Back-to-back weeks with 14 or more fantasy points. Last week against the Chiefs, they upset the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City. He's the running back 16 on the week, tied with Aaron Jones. They win 20-14, 22 rushes for 145 yards and a target. The matchup against the Colts defense is pretty solid for Zamir White. So again, if Jacobs doesn't play, I definitely like Zamir White a ton. At number 3, we got Tyler Allgeier, running back of the hot Atlanta Falcons, going up against the Chicago Bears in Chicago. 37% rostered on ESPN, 19.9% on NFL. Now, Bijan did have a solid game last week, right? I was calling for Arthur Smith to take his head directly out of his ass and give Bijan more touches, and that is what happened. And Bijan had a good game. He was a top 10 back. But guess what? Tyler Allgeier, that pesky bastard, was still involved. And Tyler Allgeier was the running back 13 in PPR. Up against the Colts, they win 29-10. Maybe Desmond Ridder really is that bad, but who knows? I don't really think, regardless of the quarterback situation, I don't think Taylor Heineke is like 8 layers above a guy like Desmond Ridder. They win 29-10. Tyler Allgeier has 9 carries for 69 yards. Very nice, I like. My name is Borat. And 1 touchdown in that game. That board impression was very, very weak. I apologize. 1 reception on 1 target for 19 yards in that game as well. This is now 3 straight games with 9 or more carries. Now, if Zamir White is the lead back for the Raiders, and with Tjae Spears' situation, right, I trust Allgeier the least out of those guys. But if your running backs are scraping through the bottom of hell to try to find a running back, right, if you're down astronomical at running back, you can definitely play Tyler Allgeier this week. Again, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like Tyler Allgeier is some must-start running back because he's not, right? He is a desperation play. At number 4, we got Demarcus Robinson. Go Demarcus! Wide receiver of the Los Angeles Rams going up against the New York Football Giants in MetLife. 2.3% rostered on ESPN, 0.4% on NFL. The Giants, Brian Daboll, hit us with some anti-Italian discrimination by benching Tommy Cutlets, the Bassin Bison for Tyrod Taylor. Again, Nick Tyrod played better than Tommy DeVito. Who cares, man? At least Tommy DeVito is just fun to watch. You know, he's a fun guy. I guess, you know, it doesn't matter if Tyrod or Tommy DeVito were under center in this game because, again, the Rams are going to absolutely buttfuck them, in my opinion. Demarcus Robinson is a very low-owned, low-rostered wide receiver, which makes perfect sense, right? Because despite the fact that prior to last week, right, he has 3 straight games with a touchdown. And then, spoiler alert, he scored on Thursday Night Football against the Saints again. He has been a guy that is very up and down in terms of his targets, right? There's games where he's getting 8+ targets. There's games where he's getting just 3 or 4 targets, and that is obviously something that is hard to read week in and week out. Now, last week, he was the wide receiver 15 in PPR. They beat the Saints on Thursday Night Football. Now, the score finishes 30-22 Rams. This game felt like it was 70-7, right? This was a game that was a straight-up ass whooping, a whomping of the Saints. Demarcus Robinson, 6 of 6 for 82 yards and a tug. And I think now we have to just put respect on Demarcus Robinson's name. Despite the fact that the Rams have 2 upper echelon wide receivers, Nick Puka's not an upper echelon wide receiver yet. He is. He is. This season, he's an upper echelon wide receiver in the league. They have Puka and Cooper fucking Kupp. And despite that, Robinson somehow finds his way into the end zone in 4 straight games. Robinson is definitely a boomer bust option, like we discussed, because the targets go up and down like a roller coaster ride week in and week out. But with all of that said, even if that sounds like slander, he has scored 13 or more points in 4 straight games, and you have to consider Demarcus Robinson as a flex option in your lineup. Again, it is very plausible. It's entirely possible that he ends up being a big fat bust in this game, right? He scores just 5 fantasy points. But based upon what we've seen recently, I think we got to start throwing some more respect onto Demarcus Robinson. At number 5, we got Romeo Doubs of the Green Bay Packers going up against the cold like Minnesota Vikings in Minnesota this week. 40.7% rostered on ESPN for Doubs, 37% on NFL. Now, basically, every single motherfucker on the Packers in terms of wide receivers are hurt right now. Wicks got hurt last week. Watson has been out for what feels like half the season, and Jaden Reed wasn't able to go last week. If they all miss again, then Romeo Doubs will be the wide receiver to number 1 on the team. Now, if Jaden Riley Reed ends up coming back, then Doubs will be the wide receiver 2 on the team in terms of targets. Now, I know the Packers are kind of a laughingstock right now, right? But it really isn't because the offense is just bad, right? And Jordan, love me tender, love me sweet, isn't playing great. It's really just because the defense blows more cock than Lana Rhodes. So I really do think that up against the Minnesota Vikings defense, sure, they have a solid defense, that Romeo Doubs is going to be very involved in this game. He was the wide receiver 19 last week in PPR, tied with the Slim Reaper Devontae Smith. Week 16 at the Panthers, W 33-30, but they just barely won that game. 4 receptions on 5 targets for 79 yards and a touchdown. Again, the defense is to blame for the Packers, and the good thing for Romeo Doubs is that the Packers defense, you could smell it, they reek to high heaven so much that they're going to have to throw a lot late in the game, and that will involve Romeo Doubs even further. At number 6, we move to Chris Rodriguez, running back of the Washington Commanders, going up against the 49ers at home in Washington. 2.6% rostered on ESPN, 0.1% rostered on NFL. Now, there's going to be a lot of hot takes this week coming out about the 49ers after they got their bell rung by the Baltimore Ravens on Monday Night Football, but we'll talk about that a little bit more in the videos as the weeks go along, or as the week goes along. Right now, the Commanders matchup here against the 49ers is tough, right? Again, I get the 49ers just got fucking bukake'd by Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. Well, let's be honest with you, this is the Commanders we're talking about. Running back 8 last week for Chris Rodriguez. Against the Jumbo Jets in MetLife, they lose 28-30. They had to tug out Sam Howell again, and then Jacoby Brissett makes a bit of a comeback. Now, they lose 2 weeks in a row, but they're only even remotely in the game, EA Sports style, because of the play of Jacoby Brissett. 10 carries for 58 yards and 2 touchdowns, 1 reception on 1 target for 7 yards. Robinson has now missed 3 straight games with a hamstring injury. Gibson played well, but it feels like the team wants to give Rodriguez more work. If Brian Robinson doesn't play, then Rodriguez would end up being a desperation start. Obviously, if Brian Robinson suits up again, then you just disregard all of this because you're not playing the running back 3 on the Washington Commanders up against the 49ers defense. Then again, oh my God, the Ravens just beat the fuck out of them. The 49ers defense is still amazing, especially when you just have to play up against the Commanders, not the Ravens. If you guys have enjoyed thus far, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button down below. It helps me out a ton. So at number 7, we got cool Joe Flacco, the elite one, quarterback of the Cleveland Browns, going up against the New York Jumbo Jets in a revenge game for Joe Flacco. 12.8% roster on ESPN, 12.3 on NFL. The Cleveland Browns said, I don't want you anymore, Joe Flacco. And Joe Flacco is going to come out like a bat out of hell up against the Jets. Quarterback 3 last week up against the Texans in Houston, eating that W 36-22. 27 completions on 42 attempts for 368 yards and 3 tugs with 2 interceptions. He has been very, very solid, rock solid, ever since becoming the starter in week 13 up against the Rams, and he has thrown 40 plus times every single game. Even with the rushing attack that the Browns have of Kareem Hunt as well as Jerome Ford F-150, they still continue to run, or they still continue to, instead of run the rock gently down the stream, like I think they would if they had 9-inch Nicholas Chubb still, they want to throw the ball a ton, and that's fun for Flacco. Now, I get that the Jets have this big bad wolf of a defense, but I still think Joe Flacco is going to sling his cock directly down their throat. I think Flacco should be a top 12 quarterback on the week, which is something that would have sounded crazy if I said it a couple months ago. Now we move to player number 8 here, Derek Carr of the New Orleans Saints, going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa Bay. 22.4% rostered on ESPN, 23.6 on NFL. It's crazy to me that Derek Carr is owned in more leagues than Joe Flacco. Now, I get Joe Flacco just magically appeared a couple of weeks ago, but Derek Carr, like, let's be honest with you, like, unless you are in full-on desperation mode, right, you got to send a prayer to the football gods on a quarterback, like, you don't really want Derek Carr. Now, again, Nick, then why is he on your list? We're going to talk about why, right? But there's a reason to understand why you might like Flacco, or why you might like Derek Carr. We love Flacco. Why you might like Derek Carr in this game, but there's also the understanding that deep down the back of your head, you realize, hey, Derek Carr has been pretty shit this year. And, you know, there's risk with playing him. Again, if you are down astronomical quarterback, sure, it's fine to play Derek Carr. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you people and say that I love Derek Carr this week. Quarterback 2 last week. Congrats up against the Rams. They lose 22-30 in LA. 27 completions on 40 attempts for 319 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 INT. So you might be thinking, Nick, that's a good game out of Derek Carr. Why do you keep slandering him? I genuinely think Derek Carr is a very boring quarterback. right? Derek Carr is like if you've been messing with some chick for a while, right? And she doesn't want to do anything else, right? She just wants to get pounded missionary every single time, right? And it's like, okay, at some point, this is getting a little bit boring. That's what Derek Carr is. He's the missionary sex of a quarterback in the NFL. He did 100% get a majority of his points last week in garbage time. He threw 2 touchdowns in the last 7 minutes of the game. But against the Bucs, I think he could easily score 20 plus points again. He's done that now in 2 straight weeks. So again, while I shit all over Derek Carr, there's worse options than Derek Carr this week. Before we pivot on into the final 2 waiver wire ads of the week, I would like to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our sponsor over at Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is the best place to play NFL Pick'em in the whole entire universe, and today, Underdog Fantasy has a great offer for you guys, but first, I want to explain how the Pick'em game works. So you're going to have to pick a minimum of 2 players from at least 2 different teams, so you can't, for instance, just take 2 players on the Lions. If you did want to do that, you'd have to match it with a player from another team. You go with the Jets, the Browns. They have every single game on here as the week goes along. They will add more and more picks. So we're going to talk about the Lions at the Cowboys game here. First, we're going to go ahead and go with CeeDee Lamb higher than 90.5 receiving yards, I think, up against the Lions defense. CeeDee Lamb should be able to have a feast in this game, and we are going to match that with David Montgomery higher than 52.5 rushing yards. I think you can definitely take advantage of the Dallas Cowboys by running the ball, and it feels like they definitely want to get David Montgomery 15 plus touches in this game, and I think he could definitely eclipse 52.5 rushing yards. So if both CeeDee Lamb and David Montgomery go higher on their number, you will receive 3 times your entry fee. If you do 3 picks, that is 6 times, 4 picks is 10 times, and 5 picks is 20 times your entry fee, assuming that all of them hit. Now, if you are new to Underdog Fantasy and live in one of the states on your screen right now, you'll receive a first match deposit bonus of up to $100 with promo code Notorious. So if you deposit $100, they give you an additional 100. You do 50, get an additional 50, 25, additional 25. The minimum deposit on Underdog Fantasy is $10. If you have a gambling problem, please make sure you call 1-800-GAMBLER. Back on into things here, we move to waiver wire ad number 9, Tucker Kraft mac and cheese of the Green Bay Packers going up against the Minnesota Vikings in Minnesota, 8.1% rostered on ESPN, 1.4% on NFL, tight end 16 last week in PPR, and that's pretty much what you're looking for out of Tucker Kraft, somewhere from tight end 16 to 10 every single week. Now, again, obviously, if you're looking for the most upside possible, I don't know if Kraft is necessarily your guy, but he has been getting enough targets recently to be maybe a top 5 guy if you get really lucky. Up against the Vikings, week 16 up against the Panthers, they win 33-30, 4 receptions on 6 targets for 60 yards. This now marks 3 straight weeks with 10 or more points. Obviously, Kraft will never be like an 8+ target guy, in my opinion, but with back-to-back weeks as a 6 target guy, he should be reliable enough to, not sink your fucking team's battleship this week, but he probably won't be enough to win you your week. And then we got Gerald Everett. Now, I kind of view Gerald Everett in the same light, going up against the Denver Broncos in Denver, 25.9% roster on ESPN, 51.4% on NFL. Tight end 12 last week in PPR up against the Buffalo Bills, tied with Colts tight end Kylen Granson. They lose this game 22-24 in a game that I was personally hoping that the Chargers would win against the Bills. Obviously, I'm a Dolphins fan. I was really hoping that, and what actually came true was something that I thought could happen, but didn't really assume would, and that was really that the firing of Brandon Staley kind of put a fire under the ass of the Chargers, right? It seemed like they were playing with some newfound hope, right? A new hope like the fucking Star Wars movie, right? It really did seem like this was a Chargers team that was fighting, clawing their way into games, whereas like previously under Staley, it seemed like they would just throw in the towel, right? Give up. So they lose 22-24, but Everett has 7 receptions on 8 targets for 42 yards. This is now 3 straight games with 8 targets. With Stick looking decent, Everett is a low-end tight end play. Now, this is a guy that really needs a touchdown to be good, right? Kraft's a guy that he's a little bit crafty, as you could say, right? He'll fucking hurdle over a guy, right? He'll try and stiff arm someone to fucking Middle Earth, right? Whereas Everett, and he just gets the ball, gets his yards, and gets out of there, right? He's a guy that will barely ever eclipse 60 yards, even with his 8 targets. So if he scores, you're going to end up happy. Kraft's a guy that can do a lot with a little. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you did end up enjoying, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below, as well as in that like button down below. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. Let's all win our championships this week in week 17, baby. I love you guys all so much. Hope you guys had a Merry Christmas yesterday. Hope you guys had a happy holidays. I love you guys all so much. Hope you have a great one. And as always, good boy. Check out one of the videos on your screen right now. Good boy.